Let's begin this morning at the chaos at airports all across the country. ICE agents are now filling in for TSA officers in at least 14 of the nation's major airports. Wait times at security checkpoints are soaring as a record number of TSA agents call out of work. And this all comes as TSA officers are going without pay due to that partial DHS shutdown. So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Skyler Henry, who's been at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta all morning long. So Skyler, during the morning show, we were tracking your progress through the line. Talk to me about how it went and what's it looking like right now.
Yeah, well, I think to say that we are back to normal may be a little premature, but there is certainly a minimal wait time as it relates to the main checkpoint here at Hartsfield-Jackson. Folks are getting through these security checkpoints in about roughly 30 minutes or so. Earlier today, that morning rush is where we saw those long lines, especially in TSA pre-check that snaked all the way outside of the airport in and of itself, as many people were trying to make sure that they got here early enough so that they didn't have to either miss or rebook their flight going forward. Really what we have seen all across the country is this game of whack-a-mole, if you will, right, in terms of log jams happening in these airports, especially what we're seeing as it relates to images out of Houston, Texas, and New Orleans, some cases here in Atlanta, where these lines stretch so far because the number of TSA callouts have hit the highest levels ever since this partial government shutdown began. Here in Atlanta, more than 40% of TSA officers called out on Sunday. Those numbers continue to be relatively high. Yesterday, we should also point out that they expect those numbers to continue to increase as those TSA officers are on track to miss that second full paycheck on Friday. And so I think a lot of people, especially the ones that we have spoken with, have talked about not only the plan that they've had to put together to ensure that they make it to their destinations on time, but they're also pointing fingers up on Capitol Hill, trying to say that Congress needs to do something in order to not only make sure that these TSA officers are paid, but to make sure that DHS is fully funded. And I think that is the impasse that we are seeing, especially in Washington right now. We know that Democrats have tried to propose measures that would include funding certain aspects of DHS, namely getting these TSA officers paid. We know that Republicans, especially the president, says that he wants them to move forward with the Save America Act before any sort of progress is made there. So we will see what happens in the days moving forward, because there certainly is a lot of frustrated travelers all across the country.
Yeah, I bet. And, you mentioned that this is a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole. We teased in our intro that have deployed ICE agents in a number of different airports to help out with the lines. Have we seen what kind of an impact it's had, if any?
Kelly, I'd say it's been cosmetic, so to speak, in that they have been here patrolling certain aspects of the terminal, engaging minimally with travelers, at least in the day or so that they have been here. From what we have seen in Atlanta, the Trump administration said yesterday that they are going to continue to sort of serve in that capacity to try to help out if where they can. Because keep this in mind as well, they can't get beyond the checkpoint. They don't have the necessary badges and clearance to do what they need as it relates to scanning luggage and those sorts of things that I think a lot of people sort of assumed once it was announced that these ICE officers would appear in what they are calling hotspots, 14 airports at least all across the country that have seen these logjams. Depending on who you talk to, some people are in favor of having these agents here, saying that any help that these people can get is necessary. But the irony, guys, is the fact that these ICE officers are getting paid. These TSA officers aren't.
That's a good point. Skyler Henry for us this morning. Skyler, thank you very much. Let's bring in CBS News congressional reporter Taurean Small, who's joining us from the Hill. So, Taurean, Senate Republicans just had a meeting with President Trump last night on a plan to fund DHS, which could help end these TSA shortages. This is not the first time. We know that there have been at least 8 different proposals that have been put forth to try and fund TSA without funding or without having to talk about or compromise on some of the other issues lawmakers are arguing over. So what's the headway that's happening this morning?
Yeah, it appears if everything stays on track, Democrats could get their way. What I'm hearing from Senate Republicans, I actually just had a conversation with Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. He believes that the president is on board with the plan that would fund every agency under the Department of Homeland Security except for ICE. That would be separated out and passed through a process known as budget reconciliation. That process is set for moving legislation only related toward federal spending and revenue, and would only require a simple majority. It overpasses or bypasses that 60 vote threshold and limits debate. That's something that it appears most Republicans are on board with. Senator Katie Britt, who met at the White House yesterday, telling our reporters that she believes this is a deal and this is the pathway forward, Vlad.
So last night, the Senate confirmed Markwayne Mullin as the new DHS secretary. Do you think there's anything he can do to speed up negotiations on this funding?
Yeah, under the impression that this doesn't hold, he could obviously lead the charge on negotiations with Democrats. We've seen border czar Tom Homan meet with Democrats and Republicans last week several times, looking to open that dialogue. Lawmakers that we talked to last week said that wasn't necessarily negotiations, it was more so of just seeing where the parties were and where they were willing to budge. Sounds like a negotiation to me, but yeah, it appears that Mullin could step up in that role. As of now, though, I just want to point out that this is the most significant progress we've seen on negotiations, considering, again, according to Senator Kennedy and other Republicans, the president is on board on separating these priorities from this bill.
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, all those folks in line that we just talked to Skyler about, certainly happy to hear about that. You know, in the background, Taurean, there's the SAVE Act. How are all of these negotiations, debates impacting that?
Yeah, that was one that was notable because the president, right, has been saying this needs to be married to this legislation. He wanted it to pass before any other bill comes out of the Senate or to his desk. He said he wouldn't be signing that unless the SAVE Act was passed from out of the Senate first. Now we're learning that the president is on board with using or attaching the SAVE Act to that reconciliation process as a rider. As I explained the process before of reconciliation, there are certain parameters, so the Senate parliamentarian might rule that it is ineligible to be attached to that, but that is a problem that Republicans will face down the road, whether or not they would want to override that. But as of now, it appears that the progress or the pathway could be attaching SAVE Act to a budget reconciliation bill.
All right, Taurean Small, thank you.